Today's episode of the Rough Drafts podcast is brought to you by Unikrn.com, the world's premier esports betting site. Their esports book covers all of your favorite titles, including League of Legends. Bet for free with Unicoins, which you can use to enter raffles for gaming prizes, and even earn Unicoins just by playing your favorite games. Some regions can even place real money bets. And while you're there, be sure to check out the esports news page where you can read great articles from their writing staff, including me, your host Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar. It's time to put your esports expertise to the test. Log on today. Hello Internet, this is Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar, and welcome to a very special edition of the Rough Drafts podcast. It is November 18th. It is an awesome time to be a League of Legends fan because it is the off-season. There are so many rumors that get started here. We're hearing licorice things with Cloud9, and we're actually about to get into the Kespa Cup for Korea, which is always a fun little off-season tournament. But we're not going to necessarily go too much into those things today because something caught my eye that I immediately said, I need to talk about this because I find it fascinating. And that was a press conference that Riot Korea held, what was it, about a week ago? I think it was around that time, that has luckily been translated by Andrew Korean Mulan Kim, who has joined us here today alongside my friend Skyler Garrison to talk about all of these interesting developments we're seeing with Riot Korea here. So let's start. Andrew, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. Thank you for having me on.
All right, happy to have you, man. How about you, Skyler? How are you feeling today?
I am doing very well. I am ready to talk about some LCK. And the article, by the way, I just looked this up, came out on Monday of this week.
On Monday, okay. Yes. So yeah, little off of my timing there, but yeah, no.
You're pretty much right on.
It's a very interesting read, and we're going to put this in the description so you guys can follow along as we kind of talk about these things. The big takeaway here is that Riot has decided to build their own arena specifically for the LCK. So they've really trying to do kind of what they've done for the LCS, where it's going to be entirely their thing and they're going to be in control of it. Which, let's start with you, Andrew, because obviously you are someone who's very ingrained within the scene. Why do you think Riot's decided to go this path? Is it as simple as they wanted to provide this quote-unquote arena experience that they've mentioned, or do you think there's more to it?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the first thing is that I don't know how long Riot has been in talks about taking over the broadcast, because I do know the press conference they talk about how they've been kind of, the idea itself was pitched from Riot Korea to take over the broadcasts and create this new arena thing. But I would be rather surprised if the recent the announcements of the Overwatch League had zero impact on Riot's ultimate decision on what to do. Because what we know now so far is Blizzard has its own arena in Burbank. It's going to be used for the Overwatch League next year. Everything is being controlled by Blizzard in terms of the broadcast, the talent and everything like that. The pros are all part of Blizzard as well. So I think part of it was like, hey, here's a project that we were kind of looking forward to doing at some point, but I don't really think it was like any time set in stone. But I do think maybe the recent announcements and developments with the Overwatch League specifically might have accelerated that process a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting when we get to like the timing of it. Skyler, what stood out to you when you saw this arena news first pop up?
Well, I had a very woo, like with a question mark at the end, kind of, because it seems unnecessary, doesn't it? We have had very successful League of Legends tournaments in Korea for many years now. I mean, basically since season 2, Korea has been at least pushing the top of world's competitiveness. So that's what now, 5-6 years of very solid, stable Korean infrastructure, both in teams and literal physical structures that have served well enough for Korean League of Legends. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is basically my reaction to it. As to why Riot decided to do this, it's not unexpected, because Riot likes to take things into their own hands, whether or not it's necessarily an improvement immediately or not.
Yeah, I think that both of you made very good points, that the Overwatch League is something that we've talked about a lot on this show. If you've listened to the NALCS franchising roundtable that I did with some of my friends and analysts within that scene, it does feel like Riot sees the Overwatch League as this big competitor that is directly clashing with their brand, and they want to be the ones to emerge, quote unquote, victorious when it comes to what becomes the key influencer, I guess, in all of these things, and that's fine. I think that's fine. Certainly, it's within their rights to do it, but there is also that aspect of control, and I want to send this back to you, Andrew, when we talk about the control, because the fear, I think, when people see, oh, there's an LCK arena now, is not necessarily like, well, what about the money, and what does that mean for viewing experience? It's about OGN and SpoTV, who have now been doing this broadcast, particularly OGN, for a very long time, and it is so professional and well known within Korea for their high production value. Do you think that this is Riot's long-term plan to push out those kind of third-party content creators, or do you think that's maybe a fear that's going a step too far from what we've seen so far?
I don't know if it's necessarily to push out SpoTV and OGN in places like that, especially given that they had Riot and those two broadcasters have had a really good relationship in the past. Nothing have ever indicated that there was any sort of like conflict or strife between the two organizations, or I should say three. I feel like part of me is saying that this is, rather than kind of like a screw you to OGN and SpoTV, I think this is more just Riot trying to, claim ownership over its brand and over its product, and OGN and SpoTV just happen to be kind of on receiving the shorter end of the stick as an outcome. And at the press conference, there was a question about, like, have you talked to the other broadcasters about how they feel about this thing? Not that they would have much say of the matter, obviously, because Riot says it, so it's their game. Mm-hmm. They can do whatever they want. But they did say that that OGN and SpoTV have been like, okay, well, we look forward to working with your projects, the LCK and League of Legends, in the future. So I don't think it's so much we're going to cut them out. It's more Riot Korea is just taking up a larger part of the LCK than it did before.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear that perspective, because having followed LCK since it was OGN Champions, I still have this feeling that Champions Korea should really be OGN's product. It was OGN's product. I mean, this is very recent that we are now considering League of Legends tournaments in Korea as anything other than an OGN production. SpoTV has done a decent job of entering the third-party broadcaster stage, but they're obviously still less practiced at it, and they have less to offer than OGN so far. And furthermore, Riot itself, while it is their game and they can do whatever they want, I entirely agree with that. Is it really in their best interest to take over something from OGN that has been working very well since the beginning? I mean, this is sort of a question that is moot now, unfortunately, in my opinion, because after Kespa and Riot navigated OGN's project away from OGN, now it's in Riot's hands. There's really nothing OGN can do to get it back, unfortunately. But is it really worth taking it further away from OGN's control when they still do such a good job of providing League of Legends content, not just in a primary sense, like broadcasting games, but also in a secondary sense, like creating peripheral videos, hype videos, which are always very well regarded by the people in the scene and fans. I'm not sure that it is worth navigating it further away from not just OGN, but third-party broadcasters who can offer very professional work done in these realms.
Yeah, please, Andrew, just jump right in.
I think that I do think part of it is I'm for one, I'm very skeptical about this whole thing. I'm not like gung ho, let's wave the Riot flag. I'm really concerned as well because a lot of what the fans have come to associate with the LCK has largely come from OGN and SpoTV in terms of the production. For instance, we talked about the hype videos, the behind the scenes videos, the original content that they've created for themselves. In order to entice viewership. One of my favorite things about the LCK from OGN and SpoTV has always been the intro videos.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Are they gonna go away? Like seriously, it's iconic at this point. Like third party music with these epic pro gamer intro videos. Like are they gonna go away? Is Riot going to continue that particular tradition? And a lot of these things are going to be lost. It's this fear, and it's a belief. I think a lot of these things are going to be lost in one way or another. Maybe they could give viewers concessions, being like, "Hey, we're going to add this or we're going to do that," but it's not going to be the same product anymore.
Right.
What we're seeing is going to be a completely new product, and on the viewer side, it could be really confusing and really upsetting because they already know and love this product for years on end. But from the business side, I don't really think Riot is necessarily looking to capture that same LCK audience. I feel like what they're doing is they're trying to create a new kind of product that would attract a whole different type of market. So if, let's say Riot does a good enough job and they lose like 50% of their original viewership, I think what Riot is banking on is long term, they attract different types of people to watch their products through Riot Korea. So, whether or not they successfully get that to happen is a whole other debate. But I do think I think it is fair to say that there are going to be some fan favorite aspects about the LCK that will be lost.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that sort of encapsulation of the situation, the dichotomy of business and the expectations of the fans, the current fans. That's a good way to look at it because I myself offer only the perspective of a long-time viewer who would stay up late to watch games overseas and who expects all of this OGN production stuff as a long-standing tradition. But you're right, they very well might be trying to capture, and knowing Riot's past decisions, I think they are trying to capture, as you say, a different kind of audience.
And this is where we kind of shift the focus to some of the comments that they've made very publicly, both in this interview and just in general when you talk to Riot NA, this idea of we want League of Legends to be a sport that lasts for decades. We believe that this esport is something we want your kids to grow up watching this game, which is one of those things that people have very strong opinions about. I know people who see it as like, oh yeah, sure, Riot, whatever you say, you'll certainly accomplish this unexpected thing that no one has ever accomplished, and that is unprecedented within the esports scene. To have a game last as long as they are talking about it lasting without some version of League of Legends 2 or whatnot. But it does seem to be something that Riot truly does believe, and if you're talking about appealing to these new markets, that's a long-term play. That's something, that's taking a short-term hit for something that they do believe will pay off that 5, 10, 15 years down the line. Which is, I guess I have to ask, Andrew, is this hubris on Riot's end, this idea of, this kind of long-term planning for this game to be still at this level of popularity 5-10 years down the road, or do they have enough where this could work? Can they pull this off, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, League of Legends is in a very, very unique position. It's like no game since like StarCraft have we seen something that take off such in a global manner. We're not just talking about like a single market. We're talking about an international market. League of Legends is still huge, still one of the biggest online games in the world, and competitively and otherwise. And I think it does kind of smack of, to me, it smacks more of ambition rather than hubris. Because I don't think it's necessarily Riot saying we can do a better job than OGN, we can do a better job than SpoTV. I think it's more like, we want to take control of it and take it in a direction that we're happy with, which again goes to the original point of having more power over its own product. I think that it's a very dangerous gamble, personally. But on the flip side of that coin, Riot Korea is not a big market. Like, if we're going to do an experiment like of this kind of like taking away third-party broadcasters and making Riot take over it, Korea isn't the biggest market, which means that it's a good sample size to have these sorts of experiments. It could come at the cost of the fans. It could come at the cost of the region itself in the short term. But I think it could be like Riot's way of saying, like, look, this is a really highly dedicated, highly passionate region who will ultimately want to watch these games, even if Riot takes over the broadcasts, and that it's a small enough market size that we're able to do new and different things in terms of content creation and broadcast techniques that potentially they look at to grow into something bigger. I don't think necessarily that, let's say Riot does a really bad job, I don't think Korean viewership is just going to drop off the planet, because Korea will still be excellent. Like, let's get something straight. Just because Riot takes over the broadcast does not make the LCK any less entertaining to watch as competitive games. And I think that people will still continue to tune in. They might complain, they might bellyache, they might be upset about certain aspects of it. But I do think that when it comes to driving the product in a direction like, let's say, a 10, 20, 30 year lifespan that they want to bring League of Legends to be, maybe Riot felt like this was the best way to achieve said goal.
I mean, clearly that's what they believe. I mean, that's just been something that they've hammered in so many different interviews. It is interesting to me, as someone who's watched the difference between North America and Europe and the experimentation they've done in those regions to try to find the right format, the right broadcast times, and kind of using Europe as that experimental league. I think that you've nailed it in terms of just Riot's willingness to try different things and make those kinds of moves if they believe that it can lead to that long-term growth. Skyler, is that something where you believe that Korean audiences will be open and willing to see what those Riot broadcasts are like and what that product shift means for them, as long as the content is good? Or do you think that this kind of experimentation is something that the Korean scene might not enjoy very much, I guess, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, enjoyment is one thing, but I would expect some serious bellyaching, no matter how good the Riot broadcast is at first. Change, no matter how good Kha'Zix says it is difficult in the real world. And when you have fans to please, not everybody's going to be happy. And I reckon there will be some very loud, very unhappy voices at first. However, bellyaching is just bellyaching. As Andrew said, I think people will still tune in to Champions Korea to see the games. I mean, it's going to be hard for me to, on moral grounds, let's say, just not watch LCK for the first time ever, just because Riot's broadcasting it. Now, I probably will watch a lot less because I don't enjoy Riot-style broadcasts. I think there's a lot of nonsense that takes up a lot of time that will be transferred to LCK, and I'm afraid that most of watching the Riot broadcast will just be wasting time. And I think that a lot of fans will have that reaction. because, as we mentioned before, this LCK viewership has been a very it's a core market that's hard to shake, but it's very hardcore. These people who watch LCK generally watch it for high-level games rather than pure entertainment's sake. Not to sound like terribly elitist, but I mean, since the Korean teams do go the furthest in Worlds, people who watch Korea for strategy generally consider it the highest league in the world, which is fairly well proven at this point, I think. So it's sort of a juggling act, right? It's both risk reward and for Riot and a test in execution. How well can they execute on this vision that they've had, which they've done a bad and good job doing in other regions? Let's say NA, with its high viewership numbers and high production value, is somewhere where they have done well. And EU LCS is somewhere where they have done very poorly. It has high potential viewership, but they have not been able to cater to the European market properly, or the world market, to interest people in Europe enough to give it the kind of numbers that they want from EU LCS.
Yeah.
Now, my last point about Riot's vision about this is that I do think it's a matter of vision and that it is a gamble. It's a risk, and they can choose basically any market in the world as a test market. But one thing about creating new things with longevity in mind, new stadiums, new broadcasts, is that who will it pay off for? Will it pay off for Riot themselves, or will it pay off for somebody else down the line? I'm not sure that this whole situation will end up with Riot on top, because League of Legends, I think, will last for a while, but won't last forever. And then who is going to pick up all the slack that Riot is leaving for this huge longevity plan that they're creating?
Yeah, that's one of those things that's always interesting to me is, what is the next stage of esports? I wrote an article for Esports Heaven about a year ago about the oversaturation problem when it comes to casual fans kind of following along, because there are a lot of games out there right now that are supposedly must-follows. We have 13 different games last time I checked with full-on competitive wikis, and that's not going to go down from what we've seen as far as the scenes kind of being satisfied, I guess, with the numbers that they're getting. And at some point, you have to imagine, as more games come out, as people get a lot more evidence, especially from watching Riot, from watching whatever this Overwatch League is going to be, someone from a development team standpoint is going to learn from this and is going to create the next big thing, whatever that ends up being. Obviously, we won't know until it's here. But when it does get here, it's going to be fascinating to see, what that Titan that could compete with something like League and can compete with something like what Blizzard is hoping Overwatch is going to be able to kind of ride off the momentum that has been established now by these, I guess, early adapters, for lack of a better phrase, when it comes to esports. Andrew, I want to direct this next question to you, because you are someone who speaks Korean. You've done so many great translations on Slingshot Esports. Rest in pepperonis, that site. But it's
no, they're all clickbait. They're all clickbait, man.
Man, I gotta say,
they're dead now, though. So rest in pesto.
I was so mad when I saw that. I don't like. I try not to pay attention to the Reddit hive mind, because if it wasn't for the fact that I need to for my job, I wouldn't find a lot of that community to be ideal. But that was a reaction that genuinely made me upset, because anyone who's actually visited the site knows how much of a variety of content that was being offered, and it's just so dumb, and I hate it. But I could go on a whole rant about Reddit. I don't know that people are interested in that. What I'm more interested in is, as someone who reads a lot of the forum stuff, who does a lot of those translations and is very much in the thick of it, what reaction have you noticed from Korean fans so far? And what are the reactions that you can expect, given your knowledge of that kind of fan base and of the kind of content that comes out there? from the Korean side of things.
Well, here's the interesting thing. When the news broke on, like, I'm just basing this off of InVen, but there's also a whole lot of different online communities talking about League of Legends. I'm sure DC Insider has a group of people who have their own opinions and stuff like that. But based purely off of InVen reactions, and because they're also a news site, a lot of them are not real. There's not any pitchforks or burning torches, which might be a surprise for some people and not a surprise for others. I have not noticed a single person make, or at least a post that made it to upvoted to high heaven from InVen saying that oh, this is terrible, Riot does a terrible job, we don't like Riot to take over, OGNs have been doing such a good job for a long time. On the contrary, a lot of people have had problems with OGN's broadcasts. A lot of people have said that OGN has a really good caster lineup in Korean, with Cloud Templar, Kim Dong-jun, and Caster Jun, which are like the holy trinity of Korean League of Legends casting. But the problem is, a lot of people were saying that the viewing experience was less than comprehensive in terms of pertinent information being shared with the viewers, following the action properly, observer tracking. A lot of people were upset about those type of things, and then a lot of people were also saying SpoTV, on the other hand, had really good observers, really good graphs, really good information delivery to the viewers, but they said the casters were god awful. So some people are saying that look, Riot taking over this is interesting, but no one is really saying that it's a good or bad thing. Some people are actually saying that hey, some new thing from Riot might be an improvement over OGN because they had their problems. Might be better than SpoTV. They had their problems. Maybe Riot is going to come in and sweep all them away and say look, we're going to do a better job than all of you. Have good casters and proper broadcast or content or whatever, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, I'm happy to hear that that's the general reaction from Korean fans, because there is a major issue if OGN is the only game in town forever, and they get complacent, and there's just becomes this sort of protectionism for OGN where nothing bad can be said about them, or nobody can even try to enter the market. So I'm glad that there's some acceptance of the possible new steps in a positive direction, at least something different. Now, for the sort of American OGN fans that I talk to, we sort of convene in dark corridors and back alleys and mutter about KT Rolster and Samsung together. We often mutter about how SpoTV is sort of subpar in the spectator camera and the and especially crowd shot reactions. The production of SpoTV's reaction shots is quite a while behind OGN's in my opinion. And this is something that this is an opinion that I've heard echoed amongst the groups that I talk to. But this is by no means a large sample size, and just because I don't know many SpoTV fans on the American side doesn't mean that they don't exist. I mean, for example, I do actually like the SpoTV casters well enough in English, even though they're not as experienced. I think that Crumbs and Valdez do a good enough job, and it's interesting to hear your explanation of the Korean reaction, because my reaction is the exact opposite. I think that SpoTV has okay casters and not so okay spectator camera. Now, that's just sort of that's just my opinion, man, basically.
and there are always going to be preferences to things, and that's something where one of the more interesting posts that I've seen do well on Reddit, which is, I can only speak English, so that's the one I spend my time on, was, that, Riot said that, these, online communities, as passionate as they can be, is only a small percentage of their fan base and a small percentage of their viewer base, and so they're not necessarily going to make decisions based on those reactions all the time. And people were like, yeah, you probably shouldn't, actually. As much as I have my feelings, there are a lot of things to consider, and I'm glad to hear that Korean fans are mostly at least open to the idea that this can work out in the long run. And I'm glad that, for what is essentially a Riot Korea decision, they're much more willing to listen to that side of the fan base rather than, what maybe the more Western fan base, where their opinions might be, and how we've been colored certainly by LCS broadcasts and kind of the expectations that Riot's created in our own leagues. To me, that's fascinating, and it's refreshing to hear, because you can see a lot of dumb on some of these social media sites, but it's when it goes right, it can be quite nice. Skyler, it looks like you have one more point you want to make before we move on to the next section.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up something that Andrew mentioned earlier in the cast, actually. This is claimed by Riot in general to have been an idea that Riot Korea pitched to Riot at large. And you can see that, the listeners, can see that in the translation of the press conference. Riot Korea supposedly pitched this to Riot Main Central. I don't know what to call it. The Big Brother Riot, basically. Run it down mid. But I am tempted to believe that, actually, because if the Korean audience reaction is so positive, then maybe this is a good testing ground for Riot's little longevity project, and maybe it'll turn into a bigger longevity project, like a China longevity project or something.
Yeah, and China's going to be another one that's fun to watch. I think there's going to definitely be an episode on their franchising movement at some point, because I find it just fascinating the way that they're going about the process, given the differences in their scene. But there's a point that we touched on at the beginning that I want to come back to a little bit, which is, Riot's reaction to the Overwatch League, perhaps accelerating the process here from the original path that Riot maybe would have taken had the Overwatch League not existed. In the interview, Riot Korea points out that they only have one producer currently on staff. And that, to me, when I hear that, it feels like this is rushed, and it feels like that could have a significant effect on their ability to initially capitalize on the goodwill that this move can create. Andrew, am I right to be concerned here, or do you think that they'll be able to grab enough production in time? Is this rushed as much as I feel that it's being rushed here?
Well, I mean, the thing is that a couple of things is, first off, is that they, at the end of the day, they still have 1 year. They still have 1 year until 2019 where they take over the broadcast, right? So, at the worst case, let's say they start today. They have a year. They have a year to, create new production, recruit new production people, and I think it would be really silly of Riot Korea to not hire and or enlist people from OGN or SpoTV who have experience working with these kind of things as an advisory kind of capacity.
But how many of those people really are going to want to do that? They already have jobs with an existing and really, honestly, better production company, because it exists already.
Well, no, but Riot can offer, like, one thing that people can offer, and because I don't know the exact numbers behind this, but Riot can offer possibly better pay, better opportunities. Some people, I'm sure, some production companies would want to go to Riot. The possibilities are endless. Like, there's no firm saying that people will or will not move. But I'd say that it would be really foolish of Riot not to at least tap into that potential expertise.
They have to try. I agree.
But they have to try, yeah. And when it comes to the casting stuff, none of the casters in LCK, including the English ones, they were never full-time employees. They were always contracted out. So Cloud Templar, in a previous stream, he talked about how he made his money. I thought for the longest time that he was an OGN employee. He was not. He's a independent contractor, and he gets money through casting with OGN primarily, but he also gets money by hosting events, casting other things, and he makes a paycheck per gig basically. which means that, all these other casters, Korean or otherwise, are also potentially able for Riot to snatch them up. Now, if any one of them want to pull a Monty and say that, like, look, I'm not just gonna do this. I'm gonna do something else. I want to expand into Overwatch. I want to expand into PUBG. Like, these are all possibilities as well. So seeing as how casters have been so far full-time employees of Riot, that means Riot will at least have to attempt to hire these Korean and English casters on a full-time basis. And if not, they have a year to, look for other candidates and stuff like that. I think the biggest concern for a lot of Korean fans, especially those who love the OGN broadcast, of if we lose the trinity of caster Jun, Cloud Templar, and Kim Dong-jin, what's going to happen?
Well, I as a response to that, if I may, we already kind of saw that with English LCK broadcast, because when Doa and Monty left, Achilleos and Papa Smithy, great casters in their own right, were in the wings to replace them, or replace them as full-time casters essentially, and it worked okay, but still people really miss Doa and Monty, and this is the issue that I'm worried about on every level, not just front end like broadcasters and the faces you see, but the behind the scenes stuff too. There are very professional casters and very professional production employees who will be coming to work for Riot, I'm sure. They're Riot, I am confident, eventually will get a great team together. But I'm worried about the... I just wonder how much of this needed to be done right now. As Chase is saying, I feel maybe it's a bit rushed. They need to, in order to inspire confidence in me as a viewer, they need to have some work already done with an existing production team. Right now, they have one producer. That's not an existing production team. They haven't done anything yet. I have no idea if they're going to be amazing or if they're going to be terrible. But the thing is that they're going to be new. And new is not always necessarily bad, but it is risky.
Yeah, and that's something where, I find the question about casters and whether it's better to be salaried or contracted, it's one of the more interesting discussions that's come up when guys like Monty and Doa have talked about this in the past to me. Mostly because, there's no real concrete answer. It's about what you prefer, right? If you want to have that diversified portfolio, this idea that, no matter what happens, you're going to have the opportunity to pick up new games and be able to smoothly transition should we ever get to the point where League of Legends is starting to dip and whatever the next big thing is going to be is on the rise. I'm not sure how successful the Overwatch League is going to be, honestly. I have a lot of skepticism about that, just from what we've seen from Blizzard in the past. But there will be a competitor to Riot at some point. No monopoly lives forever. All empires fall. History has told us that lesson time and time again in every element of the world, to be honest. So it's one of those things where I would wonder what conversations have already happened behind the scenes that makes Riot confident enough to move forward, because I have to imagine that they are confident of at least a few people coming over for them to make this call. As much as they want to, rush this and kind of capitalize on how Blizzard is only mildly investing in Korea. They only have the one team, despite how good a lot of these Korean teams have been in the Apex tournaments and everything else. They want to capitalize on this moment, and I think that they are, right to do so to some extent. But I have to believe that they have something else planned and something that we just don't know because they haven't released those conversations because nothing's been finalized yet. But if they don't, that's where we get into concerns, because we saw in the early days of the Riot LPL broadcast what it can mean if they rush into a system without establishing the proper channels And that stream had growing pains. That stream had a lot of growing pains. And I'm not convinced that the Korean audience that's so used to this high quality is going to be as patient with Riot as LPL fans were willing to be, just because there hadn't been this kind of English equivalent in the same way that we already have an English equivalent for the LCK. Now, last question on this topic, at least. I want you guys to put on your Nostradamus hats, look into your crystal balls here. Imagine we're talking 5-10 years down the line. I've invited you guys all back on the show because I hope to have you both again. Yeah, man, this has been fun. But let's imagine we're having this conversation again, and we're looking back and like, this is how it worked out. This is what worked. This is what didn't. Ultimately, Andrew, where do we end up with this? Where do you think this goes at the end of the day?
Oh man. So my prediction is this: if they want to make the LCK more like the NA and EU LCS broadcast, it's going to fail miserably. It's a totally different market, a totally different viewer base. They can't make it like the NA and EU LCS. They just can't. They just can't. It's impossible. Like, it's not going to work.
They can, but it won't work.
Yeah, no, it's just like they're not. They can't be that foolhardy in their own model. But I think I'm going to think my best case scenario, because I want League of Legends to do well. I want Riot to do well. I don't want God forbid something happens to League of Legends. I'm out of a meal ticket. But like this is what I think can happen, and I hope happens. The first off is Riot Korea has been in a long business relationship with SpoTV and OGN, which means that using those relationships and connections, Riot Korea can spend the next year like fucking studying super hard how to do a production, how to give an experience to the Korean fans, what are the Korean fans looking for, how do we make the pre-existing experience better for the fans at the arena or outside of it. I think if Riot Korea really buckles down and starts studying, and if they have been studying, that's even better. But let's say they started studying the broadcasts of OGN and SpoTV, create the best of both worlds, and maybe improve on it on a production scale, that would be the best case scenario. Now, how do they achieve that? I think would be a very difficult task. The first start would be, grabbing people from OGN and SpoTV who have really big experiences working at these productions. And I'm sure a good number of them are willing to part ways with OGN or SpoTV for one reason, personal reasons or another, to Riot Korea to make a better product. And they're already, and Riot already put in millions of dollars into making the arena itself. I wouldn't be surprised if they're saying that, look, our personnel budget is going to be this much. It's going to be a lot of money, and we're looking for the best of the best to come work with us. I won't be surprised if that turns out to be the case. So production value wise, best case scenario, that's what they do. In terms of casters, I think at least in Korean casters, if they can't secure the holy trinity, which they most likely won't, because Caster Jun likes being a freelancer, and I'm pretty sure Cloud Temper likes being a freelancer as well. It's going to be a really hard and arduous long-term journey for them, because not only has those three kind of been the face of Korean League of Legends for a long time, they have a pre-existing chemistry. It's really hard to create that kind of chemistry again. So, that's going to be a really, really... I think that will be, ironically, the toughest part. Acclimating the Korean market to potentially a new casting crew. Because that's what a lot of people say why they watched OGN. They didn't like OGN's observing. They didn't like OGN's information delivery. They watched it because it was where Cloud Templar and Kim Dong-jun were. They loved their banter. They loved their casting style. That's why they watched it. So acclimating a brand new casting crew to the market, I think is going to be one of the most difficult things that Riot has to do. But it's something that they're going to have to tackle on that front. On the English side, I don't really know the willingness and or availability of Papa Smithy and Achilles in terms of do they want to maintain their free agency or not? If they do, then obviously they're gonna have to go searching for another pair. But seeing as they were kind of they were trying to fill the big shoes of Monty and Doa, and let's be honest, any future casting crew is going to continually compare to Monty and Doa. I think that the English casting would be a little less difficult in comparison to the Korean one, just because the Korean one will just have so much larger shoes to fill. And in terms of like the arena stuff, how they want to have the fans feel more involved and more entertained, I think that's something that Riot can do uniquely, unlike OGN and SpoTV, because they had no control over the Sangam or the Nexon arena. They had like a set amount of people that can come in, a set amount of time that the games should ideally last. The fan interactions were very limited. They were always downstairs where like there was no barricade or no like protection for the players. It was just like a group of people and the fans and the pros taking pictures. I think that experience they can improve on greatly, and they plan to do so. So I'm really optimistic on that. So it gave a better reason for people to go watch them in person. So just to sum up, production, if they really dig in their heels and work really hard from now on, poach some people from OGN and SpoTV, it's going to look okay. Casting is going to be a long-term investment. It's going to be really difficult and it's going to be painful, but they're still going to have to do it anyway. And in terms of the arena, on-site fan interactions, the only direction they can go is up, which will entice people to come watch the games in person, or at least go to the arena, to the PC bunks, to the cafes, and have their own unique experience that only the arena can offer. Those are my 3 things.
So the arena experience is something that I want to touch on before I answer Chase's initial question of what conversation are we having in 5 years? I think you're right. I don't have experience in the new Korean studios, but Yongsan definitely had a lot of user unfriendliness involved. You had to go to the top of a building, and you weren't really sure where it was. And then when you got up there, it was just sort of like one double door and lawn chairs. Charming, but it was a nice interior to the studio, but fan interaction outside of it was basically, as you said, just lining up and taking pictures with the pros, very unorganized, and it had sort of an intimate feel if you're willing to be positive about it. But sure, I agree with the idea that you can definitely go upwards. I wouldn't say the only direction's up because I'm a little too cynical for that, but I'd say that upward is where Riot's going to go with that. I am also excited about the whole PC bong situation in the new Riot arena. But I'm more pessimistic about the overall outlook. Do I hope it succeeds? Yes. I would love to go to this Riot studio in a couple years in the future on a visit or whatever. And it sounds like it'll be a great fun viewer experience and a nice arena. I'm sure they'll do a good job with that. However, this is inherently tied to League of Legends as a game and the health of esports as a whole. And is Riot going to continue to single-handedly dictate the future of esports forever? No, I don't think so. And this arena might be a little short-sighted in the League of Legends exclusiveness of it. I'm not sure, I am by no means keyed into Riot internal business, but I am of the opinion that it's a little bit of Riot hubris on this front. So in that sense, my prediction for the future, if we have this conversation 5 years in the future, we'll be talking about, so that worked well for a while, but now something needs to change again. It's going to be something in production or venue accessibility by other games or Riot control of it. But I think that something's going to need to change in a big way. And I hope Riot's prepared to make big changes again that soon.
Well, and that's the most interesting part to me, because we're talking about a company in Riot Games where a couple of the guys at the highest position in the company have talked about how they believe that they founded esports, which is one of those ridiculous claims, but it's something that there are people in Riot who genuinely believe this. There are people in Riot who genuinely believe they are the face of esports, and that this is their scene to dictate, and that they're going to be on top forever. I think that you nailed it there at the end, Skyler, where it comes down to how long does that reign last, and how much can they get out of it, and how willing are they going to be to pivot. And I agree with you, Andrew, that the biggest problem is going to be the casters, because the Korean casters are so beloved Templar and June are just overwhelmingly considered to be the best casters. And I am jealous that I cannot speak Korean and enjoy them as much as everyone who can.
Anybody can enjoy Caster June, whether you're a Korean speaker or not.
Yeah, honestly, the most entertaining parts are always when they're yelling all at once. Anyway, so
absolutely,
that's very fair. Before we wrap up here, give me your 60 seconds each on the Kespa Cup, which is going to be happening in a couple days. We're gonna, this is the tournament for those of you who don't follow in the West, where you have some of the best LCK teams go up against the challenger teams in a couple different tournaments and the league, I believe, in the KEG. What should fans be looking for, Andrew? What's the most exciting thing that you're looking forward to for this event?
Oh God, for me, honestly, I hope a lot of people just like view it as like a way that not so much a competitive tournament, but more like just have fun. Mm-hmm. I hope it's more like people view it as a more like a preseason kind of fun type of tournament. Because if you look at the people involved, I mean, obviously KT Rolster, Samsung Galaxy, SKT, Longzhu, they're going to be part of the second stage immediately already. So, like, I think it wouldn't be difficult for people to expect, Samsung Galaxy, KT, and SKT or whatever to have like maybe a finals rematch for the Worlds or whatever, because they're on the opposite side of the brackets. But I think what people should really look forward to is actually the lower brackets. Afrika Freaks, MVP, KG Gangwon, BQ Olivers, Generic Win Rings, Kongdu Monsters, Rocks Tigers, Ever 8 winners. I think these are the teams you have to look out for because these are the grassroots. If you love the LCK, you got to pay attention to the grassroots. Man.
Oh, yeah.
You got to pay attention to the grassroots. And these are the grassrootiest that you can get with the Kespa Cup. So I hope everyone kind of like compartmentalizes their brain of like, this is the best team that's going to win. No, don't forget about that. Watch the lower brackets if you have the time. Look at where these guys are. See who the next rising stars will be, and then make your anticipations of the LCK Spring Split based on what with the data you collect through the Kespa Cup.
Yeah, totally. I'm totally with you there. The off season in Korea is always crazy and a lot of fun. Sometimes people criticize LCK or Korean play for being too formulaic or too percentage based. Like, always choose the right path, no matter whether it's the most boring game of all time or not. But you're going to see some crazy stuff in this tournament. So it's going to be exciting from a viewer standpoint, and a lot of innovation and a lot of rising stars are going to come from this Kespa Cup tournament. We saw the rise of Samsung Blue leading up to the World Cyber Games in a similar tournament many years ago. First Lucian picks. There was a lot of faker killing going on in that tournament. You're going to see a lot of the teams who you regard as not as good in the LCK, like maybe the Rocks Tigers and MVP, do a lot better than you expect, I think. And you're going to see some of these new names that I have never seen before. Also, rest in peace, CJ Antis. They're probably going to surprise you. I would highly recommend, whether there are English casts available or not, try to grab at least some of the most exciting games. Maybe wait for the VODs and see what people say is the best. If you're a viewer who is interested in sort of dabbling, totally just wait, catch the VODs, and see some exciting games in the lower end of the bracket.
Yeah, it's one of those tournaments that's always fun to me. You could definitely tell that some of the better teams in Korea are willing to kind of, take it less seriously, which they absolutely deserve after, Worlds and such a competitive split. Last year, the Rocks Tigers won it all, which sounds hilarious, and it kind of is in its own way. But that's the kind of...
Don't forget about Ever 8 as well.
Yeah, Ever 8 in 2015. Yeah. It's always interesting to see which of these kind of lower bracket teams can rise to the occasion. And I will just close by saying that as a CJ Antis fan, it was time. I finally like my soul is at peace because there's nothing left for me to cling to. I spent the last year just watching them like, oh man, they're doing so well in Challenger. I guess I have to keep caring because they might come back. And then they'd fail miserably with the promotion tournament because of course they did. Because why would I expect anything else after watching CJ Entus for years and years? So I'm glad they could let me down one last time and just bow out here. It was time, and I hope it'll be fun now. I can finally be an LCK widow. I can let that time pass and heal, and then hopefully have a new favorite team for the summer, because I'd love to have a team that I was personally connected to. I also
I'm a huge MVP fan, man. I'm
a huge MVP fan too.
I actually got to talk to them at their gaming house when they first started. I'm gonna share this with the podcast. It's like, I never told this to several bosses. I was supposed to meet up with the players, the coaches, and the head coach, but when I got there, the players were like groggy. They just woke up. It was like 12 o'clock. I got in and I was like, "Hey, where's the coach and head coach and the manager?" And they're like, and the players tell me, I think Max is the one who told me, it's like, "Oh, they drank too much last night, so they're
Classic.
yeah, they won't be here." Like, oh, okay. So I just did my interview with the players. MVP, goddamn, they didn't do well in 2017, but they are fun to watch. Like,
Yeah,
those guys.
I love them.
Like,
love them to death.
And anyone who wants to just watch like wacky Korean fun in the world where the, like, Korean formula is like dominant, watch MVP. Just watch MVP and like be, oh my god, this is so entertaining. I can't believe Koreans can be this crazy.
Yep. And I mean, they also have a history of innovating crazy picks, like
Scion support.
Scion support, which was an accident because they wanted to play Rengar support or something. I don't know. They're just so they're at their best when they're just picking wild and playing wild and totally surprising top teams, coming out with quadra kills and pentakills, and they're just they really are a solid roster from top to bottom, and they've been in contention for like the lower end of the top teams for a good while now. So if you're an MVP fan or you want to be an MVP fan, welcome, my sons and daughters.
Yeah, you make a great point, and as a Scion main, I do love that support Scion a lot. They have been a very fun team to watch, and I hope this has been a very fun podcast to listen to. If you guys enjoyed it, you should definitely follow me on Twitter at RedShirtKing. Be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening, on SoundCloud, iTunes, on YouTube, whatever. It really does help us out, and obviously keep that conversation going. I do read every comment, and I love talking to you guys and hearing your thoughts, because I think that this is a very fascinating topic.
Confirmed.
And I definitely think this is going to be something we're going to be talking about for a while. I want to thank my two awesome guests for coming onto the show. Andrew, where can the nice people at home find you and your stuff?
So you can find me on Twitter at Korean Mulan. It's Korean_Mulan. I also, now that I am woefully unemployed, I also have a Medium page. I'll be posting a lot of my stuff on my Medium thing, hopefully. Any translations, anything like that. I also tend to translate fun Korean pro social media interactions and event reactions as well. So if you like throwaway content and free karma, come follow me on Twitter, and you'll be able to fish something out of myself. Other than that, hopefully you guys can look forward to me either writing or being part of the industry sometime soon.
Oh yeah, no, it's you've written some very great stuff over the years. I highly recommend people check your stuff out, because I do think it's been a great source of insight for me, certainly when it comes to the LCK. Skyler, it's your favorite part of the podcast. Where can the nice people at home find you? What do you want to plug on your way out?
Well, you guys can't find me anywhere, suckers. I'm like the Untouchables from the movie The Untouchables. So yeah, I don't really have any like contact or existing websites or anything. But I will just throw a plug over to my friend who started a new podcast. It's called One Season Wonders. If you want to hear a podcast about two goofy guys talking about canceled TV shows that were canceled after one season specifically, go check it out. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, there you go. I love your plugs, because it's always something different, and I would never expect
this time it's actually something real.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We will be back. I have a big announcement for the show that I should be making sometime next week. I think I teased that I was going to do it a couple weeks back, but things have come up. But I'm very excited for the future of this show, and I'm looking forward to telling you guys all about it. But until then, goodbye, Internet.